And Cleo, before we start, I see you're recording, right? Okay.
Do you want me to stop?
Nope. So I'll call the meeting order, and I see we have Connie, Mary, myself, Cleo, and Tom in attendance. Okay. Just covering off some business first. First item up is acceptance of the last meeting minutes. So looking at a motion.
I motion that. It's Connie.
Thank you, Connie. Can I get a second? Mary, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now? Yes, I was muted.
Perfect.
Yes, I'll second.
Great. All right. Resolved that the minutes of the April 27th, 2021 meeting be accepted as prepared. Each audit committee member having received a copy. Motion carried by all. All right. And then next up we have is the independent auditor's audit plan. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark Levy. And Mark, it's your turn. You're on mute. Mark, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. For some reason, you guys come in through really softly to me, but hopefully it'll work. All right. You want me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. So everybody, hopefully you have an agenda, and very similar to previous years. So we're starting the audit. We'll start the field work in June. So we haven't confirmed a date yet, but next week I'll confirm a date with Cleo and Jean as to when we're going to start. So we'll come for probably 2 days in June. Then we'll do the field work come August, the week August 2nd. So we'll spend a whole week with the team, then doing all the field work of the audit basically. And then so the overall schedule is we expect to have a draft on or about September 13th and a public presentation on or about October 5th. But again, I haven't discussed those dates with Cleo and obviously the audit committee yet. So those dates are subject to change, but that's just going through what I thought, sort of made sense. Audit team will be very similar to last year. So, we'll same staff will be on the audit again. So we have good continuity there. The preliminary procedures when we start next month, basically, we will have reviewed, board minutes. If there's audit committee minutes that we can see, we'll review them. We'll request internal audit reports that you may have had done over the past year. And then we'll, just reading down my list, we'll evaluate the internal controls. So the big thing that we're doing in the preliminary, because we're doing some testing of documentation, but we're really reviewing internal controls and procedures in place by the district, just to see if anything's changed from previous years, especially if there's any staff changes, but just if new policies have been instituted or changed from prior years. So that's a big part of what we're doing in the preliminary, just to see the controls and how they're working of the district. Then we use those evaluations of the internal controls to, determine what audit procedures we're going to do. And we'll have our staff, meeting, engagement team meeting to discuss if there's any areas that seem to require more attention than maybe previously thought, depending on how the results of our inquiries go. And again, if the audit committee has any special areas or management for that matter that you'd like us to look at, please let us know, and we can always possibly look at those areas a little more in depth than we may not have otherwise. Okay, so once we have the audit plan established, then we're ready to pretty much start the field work in August. One of the things here I have under 3F is the determination major programs. Typically in your district, we rotate through programs for the single audit every year. So we usually do, like last year we did the special education cluster, and then we would probably do school lunch this year, and then we would rotate back to Title I. So every third year we're kind of cycling through that process. This year though, because you got CARES Act money, I was talking to Cleo and Jean the other day, we may be required to audit that program, and we may have to do that and let's say the school lunch program, because we need a certain amount of coverage for the single audit for the audit area. If we don't have enough coverage, then we have to look at additional programs. So just letting you know. So we'll have to see, once we come and do the preliminary work of the district and we actually see what expenditures you have for, for federal funds, then we can make a better determination on what areas we have to pick. But we did the special education cluster last year, so we wouldn't be doing that this year for sure.
Cleo, can I just ask one question related to federal
Sure.
funding? So for that CARES Act funding, I thought, and again, I know Mark will go through it at the time, but if you have more than $750,000, you earn yourself a single audit, right? And
That's
then
correct.
I thought that, depending upon your CFA, right, it'll tell you what's a major program and what's not. So I don't know how much funding you got from CARES Act. So hopefully maybe it won't be a major program depending upon funding level, but.
It was $299,632.
Gotcha. So I don't know, Mark, like how your program will identify
Right.
what's
Well,
major or not.
Yeah.
Right,
Hopefully.
so what happens, in a nutshell, what happens is we're required to, yes, if you have a program that's $750,000 or more, that's automatically a major program.
Right.
So your special
Right.
education cluster was a major program, but since we looked at that last year, we wouldn't look at it this year because they want you to rotate through your programs. So the problem is you go to what they call type B programs now. So your CARES Act money, it falls under a type B program. And because it's a new program and you've never had it before, obviously, and there's certain, special requirements regarding it, many times the federal government kind of requires that to be looked at. So that's why we have to find out the requirement to be looked at. Or not.
Mark, can I just ask too, because the CARES Act is the only federal grant that is actually running through the general fund this year. It's not running through the special aid fund.
Okay, but you got CARES Act money. Did you get some CARES Act money that didn't run through the general fund or only the general fund?
So the first round of stimulus money, the guidance out of New York State and OSC was that we ran it through the general fund through I think 4286 was the right. So it ran through.
So is that the when they say ESS, ERF and gear? Is that? I see
Yes.
that. Sure. Okay.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
So yeah, if it only ran through the general fund, it may not be subject because there is some CARES money that is not subject to single audit this year.
Right. So the round two and round three are going through the special aid fund. But again, those money, we're just doing the application process for round two now. So.
Okay. Yeah, so then we may be fortunate. We may be just doing the school lunch fund. But again, once we come in, we'll look to see what you have to be sure, and I'll do a little bit more research. But I do think, the money that went to the general fund, I believe, is not subject to the single audit this year.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So on number 4, just going down the agenda. So we did send a preliminary list, pretty lengthy list, but it's all normal stuff that we ask for every year to the district already, so that they can begin preparing what they need for when we start the field work in August.
Mark, when do you plan on coming in June?
We don't have the exact date. That's why I'll work it out by next week. And we're trying to schedule all our schools right now. So I'm going to guess it'd be just, for lack of better time, to say mid-June.
Okay. So maybe Cleo, if you don't mind, maybe you and I can just connect before Mark comes in. I'd like to.
Yeah, because I know it will not be next week for sure. So I'm assuming it'll be either the week after or.
I sure would hope you wouldn't be showing up next week and giving Cleo no notice. Hey, I hope you had a great weekend.
Well, that's it. That's a lot of it.
Right. Don't ruin my long weekend, Mark.
Yeah, come on. So, but once you land on a day with Cleo, if you don't mind just circling back with me.
No worries, of course.
And then I apologize. I don't know if it's Mary or Jean. If you don't mind, if you can go on mute, we're just getting to the background noise.
She just asked if there was an option. She can do the other option.
Maybe it's Mary. Okay, turn it back to you, Mark.
Okay.
No, I think I'm muted. So, I mean, I just took it off mute. So.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So then, what we usually do is usually towards the end of August. I'm on number 5. Toward the end of August, early September, we'll come in and we do a little further testing, subsequent testing, and if we haven't been able to finalize, we finalize a single audit at that point. And then we prepare the draft financial statements, and then that process begins, reviewing it with management, of course, and then reviewing it with the audit committee. So number 6, though, that's the area that I figure we're going to spend the most time on tonight. I don't know if we're going to come to any conclusions, but I'll give you a brief history. I guess before I start, does anybody know about GASB 84? Not really. You know, I mean, I talked to Cleo and Jean somewhat, but I don't know if the audit committee itself, you're familiar with GASB 84. Okay, I'll go through it. Basically, GASB 84, if you really read it, was really meant for districts and municipalities to disclose information about pension plans and other post-employment benefits that maybe weren't being disclosed originally by districts. You know, basically that part of GASB 84, which is a big part of it, doesn't really affect most New York State school districts. What really does affect New York State school districts, which gets sucked into the whole GASB 84 issue, is your extra classroom activities, pretty much everything that was in your fiduciary funds on the financial statement, your extra classroom activities, your private purpose trusts or your scholarships, and miscellaneous other liabilities, such as like AP deposits from students for AP exams, some of those types of liabilities, payroll liabilities. So anyway, it's not a cut and dry issue. It's not like you just read it and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. So in a nutshell, GASB 84 says we're going to either, I have to talk each section separately. So like extra classroom activities. So we have to make a determination, is extra classroom activities considered ultimately in a custodial fund, which is kind of like the old fiduciary funds, or is it going to be reported in either the general fund or a special revenue fund? And the criteria to make that decision has to do with really, does the district have administrative control over these assets? By definition, because they're in a district, even though the children have raised these funds and oversee the expenditure of these funds, they're in what's technically still a school district account, okay? They don't have separate, even though extra classroom activities has separate accounts, they're still South Orangetown School District accounts. So theoretically, you have what's called control because you have assets, but that doesn't mean you have administrative control. So the administrative control is the gray area. And in my feeling, and well, I was telling Cleo and Jean this the other day, every school district can come to a different decision based upon the facts and circumstances of that school district, but also every auditor, can have a different, viewpoint. In fact, I have a copy of the bulletin that the comptroller's office put out, and in a bulletin they talk about most school districts are probably going to put their extra classroom activities in either a special revenue fund or the general fund. Personally, I and some of the other partners at the firm, we disagree with that because we really think, in most schools, it really should be a custodial fund. So, because what happens is the funds, I read your board policy. So what happens is if the board policy and board regulations really said you're dictating how the money's going to be spent, how they can fundraise and whatever, you have general parameters. Obviously, they can't be involved in illegal activities. So, that's not administrative control. That's just, proper, it's supposed to be an educational experience for the kids. So there's got to be some guidelines. So that's not considered administrative control. Some people will argue, though, that the very fact that you're following New York State guidelines, like as a school district, every school district in New York State supposedly supposed to follow guidelines put out by SED and regarding extra classroom activities. Some people feel just the nature of that means you have administrative control. I personally don't necessarily agree with that. And there's actually a questionnaire in the and from the comptroller. I don't know if you can see this, but there's a questionnaire from the comptroller. And if you follow the questionnaire, and it goes through a series of 15 questions and it goes up and down. And if you say no, you got to go here. If you yes, you go there. Anyway, I think you can make a valid point that your extra classroom activities really should be fiduciary still, and we leave them in the custodial funds. But ultimately, I can tell you what I think it's supposed to be, but ultimately the district is supposed to decide. And every district that I've talked to, in other words, because one decision is you include these funds in the general fund. No district wants to do that. Nobody wants to put in the general fund. So then you're left with, it's either going to go in a special revenue fund or it's going to stay in the custodial funds, which is, the fiduciary funds. And I'm leaning towards saying, hello. Okay. She brought up the questionnaire. So yeah, if you follow that questionnaire through for the extra classroom funds, I feel pretty comfortable that you can make the argument, even though that you make the argument that this should be a custodial fund. And it's kind of like, you still have to get a new chart of accounts and it's going to be presented a little differently than in prior years, but it's basically going to be sort of business as usual if you go this route. You know, and again, some of these questions are in the gray, but I do believe if you go through the questions and because like, I'll just do the first two. Is the entity a component unit? No, they're part of the school district. It's not a component unit. Are the assets held for pension? No. So it tells you, you know, right there, you're skipping on to number 5 and then going on to number 6. Well, actually, I'll skip to 5. Does the government control the assets? So you have to say yes to that because as I said earlier, just the fact that it's a South Orangetown School District bank account, you have control of the assets. So then it says go to number 9. And I don't want to bore you by this, but if you go up and down these questions, because eventually it's going to be a no and it's going to tell you go back to number 6. And then you go through, I've been through this numerous times for your district and other districts. Ultimately, the extra classroom activities, feel fairly confident that, you know, we can call them, you know, at number 15, it's kind of blocked out, but number 15 says the activity would be reported in a fiduciary fund. I think you can come to that conclusion for extra classroom. But, you know, I don't know, you know, administrative control is interesting. It's a gray area. You know, in the GASB, they actually give question and answers. And one of the actual examples they give you, they talk about a school district. I mentioned illegal activities. They say the Board of Ed says you can't have illegal activities and you have to elect student officers to the different clubs and have a faculty advisor. And basically, that's not considered administrative control. It says right in the GASB, that's not enough to be administrative control. They allude to things less than that are administrative control, but they also allude to other things more than that are administrative control. So it's really a gray area. It's interesting, that the fiduciary activities questionnaire that was listed on the screen, like I say, if you follow that through, you can make the argument that it still should be custodial. In that same document, though, different part of it, not the questionnaire, the comptroller's office is saying that most school districts are probably going to put this into like some type of special revenue fund or the general fund. So it's kind of funny that their own form here kind of leads you to saying it's going to be a fiduciary activity, but they're making the statement in here, most school districts probably are going to say they have administrative control. So it's kind of like they you know, they kind of said it both ways. It doesn't really go together. So I don't know that we're gonna have a decision tonight. You know, we're still talking over at the firm, but as I said to Cleo and Jean previously, I do think that fiduciary activities is probably the right place for the extra, my personal opinion, it's the right place for the extra classroom activities. Moving on, did anybody have any questions? Because it is kind of a confusing area, but it is what it is. I didn't rate the standard.
Mark, I appreciate it. And for sure, you know, obviously, as you go through the questionnaire, it kind of puts you in a box to a certain degree. Cleo, what's your point of view on this?
Well, when I was talking to Mark earlier this week about it, as we were talking through it, again, I was leaning more towards not running it through the general fund and running it through that special revenue fund for the purposes, right, as he said, although technically the assets do belong to the districts, extra classroom is really meant to empower students, you know, from an officer level, running those clubs and being involved in having those administrative roles. They have administrative control over those dollars. So I was leaning more from our conversation.
I just like to throw out too, SED just came out with a statement that says, in other words, if you remember the financial statement that we have prepared for the district, in the very end of the financial statement is the extra classroom activities as a standalone fund.
Right.
SED, so one would believe, I mean, just trying to use common sense if you can apply any common sense to this, which that's iffy. One would believe if the SED wants that fund to still show up as a separate standalone fund, which they put out a memo that says they do, to me, they're kind of indicating, then this must be a custodial fund, because if it was supposed to be a special revenue fund and part of actually the governmental funds of the district, why would you have a standalone fund for that fund and no other funds? Doesn't really make sense. So, you know, that's
just came out with that.
They just
It
came out with that like
today?
possibly today, it was either yesterday or today.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so
Okay.
you know, I like I say, that's not the be all end all, but it just, you know, you have to apply a little common sense to this, and it's just, you know, substance over form if you want, whatever. But it just, why would you show it as, why would you continue to show it as a separate standalone fund if it's meant to be part of the district assets? I don't really, that doesn't make sense to me. But again, that's my 2 cents.
Leo, when you research it too, you might just want to get like legal to kind of weigh in on, is there something that they could tell you yes or no, you have it by virtue of A, B, or C, because accounting would typically follow legal. So that might help.
Right,
Well,
right.
that's a great point, and that's going to directly go along with my next
Right.
point here. So the next topic that you have to deal with, okay, again, GASB 84 wasn't meant to really deal with these kind of things. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't want to deal with it, but it was really meant for pensions and other post-employment benefits, different things like in New York State, the school district can't have a trust for other post-employment benefits. Other states, they can do this. And that is a big thing with GASB 84 and how those funds would be reported. Anyway, so scholarships is the area. So what happens with scholarships is, in other words, you've received the money. It didn't come from money. They came from donations from the public, from your taxpayers, and it didn't come from any activities of the government. You didn't go out there and charge people, for usage, or you didn't charge them and say you have to give us a donation for scholarships. They were, they were contributions to the district, so they weren't earned with the normal activities of the government. And anyway, and it was for the benefit of these students. It's not for the benefit of the district. So, but what happens is, if you read through GASB 84, they want one of the criteria on whether scholarship should be.
What about this one?
Hello?
Upstairs in your room? Why?
Cleo, I think it's you with the background noise.
Oh, I don't know. Okay. Anyway, I heard something, but so getting back on track, I'm sorry where I was going. The scholarships are supposed to be held in a trust. One of the criteria is if it's going to be custodial, they want the scholarships to be in a trust. And if they're not in a trust, they indicate, well, then they must be district assets, and they would be included in like a special revenue fund or the general fund of the district. But interesting enough, in GASB 84, it also talks about, though, when I talk about these trusts, it says they have to be administered through a trust or an equivalent arrangement. So they open the door that they don't have to actually be in a trust. Every school district that I deal with doesn't have a trust. In other words, you've held these assets. They could have been for 20 years, 50 years, it could be 5 years, whatever, where you get a donation from a family and they say, we want to set up, the Mr. Smith or Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones, whatever scholarship. And you've administered it like it was in a trust because you've kept those assets segregated and you've given out a scholarship every year, I would assume, for that particular scholarship. So that's sort of falling into this equivalent category. However, the criteria, which is what Camille just brought up, is would these assets, and I'm throwing it out to the audit committee and Jean and Cleo, would these assets be subject to creditors' claims? Because if they're subject to creditors' claims and they're not in a trust, well, if they're in a trust, they wouldn't be subject to creditors' claims. But if they're not in a trust formally and they're not subject to creditors' claims, then you can make the argument, okay, then they should be custodial funds. If you're going to say they're subject to creditors' claims, then they should be in one of these special revenue funds, let's say. And that's where I think you should call out to your lawyers, because I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but we did write a letter as a firm, one of our partners did, to the law firm and ask for a response on this question. Like, would they think, you're not going to go out of business, but let's just say that happened and your creditors came in and wanted to take the assets, whatever, would they be able to take the scholarships? We didn't get a response, so we're kind of asking business officials, and to call up their attorneys and see if what they thought on this matter. So I don't know, Cleo, if you could try that, but it's worth a shot and see what they say.
I could do. Yeah, I could do that. I mean, these are all monies that flow through our financial management system, but don't belong to the district at all.
Right.
Right. So
but they're still held in a district account, but
right.
You monitored them properly and they're not meant
Right.
for any other purpose.
Right. Exactly. And, I guess it depends on if it's the creditors that the money belongs to. I feel like they should be able to access those funds because the funds don't belong to us. But I have that on my agenda for our legal call Thursday morning.
Okay, that'd be great. I hope you get some type of answer. they may, you know,
too.
yeah, I don't know. I don't want to put words in their mouth, so I don't know what they'll say. Because I could see them saying, no judge would ever give this money to a creditor because it's meant for scholarships for the kids and whatever, but you may say legally it is. I don't know. I don't know.
And plus we have to be careful, right? Because how it's designated a scholarship could be somewhat loose, I'll say, right? I mean, there's just, I don't want to, you know, there's not a lot of formality around when somebody makes a donation towards, you know, to a scholarship.
Yeah, because you know, somebody in an ivory tower, you know, wrote Gatsby 84. And it was easy to say, well, yeah, if these scholarships should have been in trust funds. The reality of it is, like I say, I don't, you know, I'm not aware of any of the school districts we ought to using trust funds for these scholarship funds.
Sorry, I'd like, yeah. So what I'd like to say, you know, so definitely, you know, Mark, I really appreciate you bringing this up. And I saw, so this is effective this closing year, right? So it's not like, you know, so the good news is, as Cleo mentioned, right, all these different types of funds are being separately accounted for. So
Right.
So however we decide to adopt 84, we've got the record keeping in place to report it any way that we need to. So it's not like we're, you know, it's going to create more complexity. So I've got two requests, and I'll open it up for the rest of the group. Cleo, sounds like you've got a call coming up with legal after legal has shared their thoughts, and also you've also reviewed whatever the latest guidance that came out of SED. Maybe just share an update with the council, just so we have, you know, a little bit more background on the findings from legal, as well as just your recommendations and what the ramifications would be. And then in the meantime, Mark, it sounds like your firm has been doing a lot of work on this. If you've got,
Yeah.
I don't want to necessarily volunteer the group to get, you know, reading, you know, stuck reading all of Gatsby 84, but if you've got, you know, your memo or some effective summaries that you've seen out in industry published, if you could share that as well with the council. I think
Sure. Yeah, I can, you know, send some notes
Yep.
on
And
that.
then technically speaking, when would we have to conclude on this?
Well, that's
Obviously
what
not September.
you know, I mean, yeah, basically, I would like to have the conclusion, you know, by June 30th. However, if we don't make this full decision until sometime in August, that's not out of, you know, that's not like not allowed, you know, it's fine.
Understood. So obviously, right, let's get more information. And I mean, this is our last meeting for the year. Right. So let's get the meeting, you know, the details circulated. And Cleo, you and I could touch base.
Yeah, because I'll share with you, sorry to interrupt. I'll share with you though. So one of the partners in our firm is involved with the school business officials, like the committee they have in New York State. And when this first got discussed, you know, most of the audit committee thought I'm just talking about extra classroom for now, should be in the custodial funds. But there were audit firms that go to these meetings and say, no, we're going to put it in the special revenue fund or the general fund. And while everybody's entitled to their opinion, and every school district could be different, because, you know, not every school district never fits the same mold. But in other words, they were wrong to even say that. My point is, like, it's wrong for us to say you're doing it one way. I mean, you're all going to do it the same way, because we have school districts that have told us they want to put it in a special revenue fund. They're not going to leave it in a custodial fund. And we have other ones that have told us they were going to keep it in a custodial fund. So it's really not one size fits all here. It really is, you know, we can do it differently for your firm, for your school district, than we do for different school districts. So it's not like a blanket response.
Got it. So between you and Cleo, ultimately at the end of this, I would hope we can kind of package this up, put more background material so the folks on this council can review it in more detail. But then Cleo, if you can help us kind of outline, you know, a recommendation and kind of what the implications are. And we'll see if, you know, if we can get the, you know, everybody to raise any concerns, and hopefully we get it done by June, but recognizing if it doesn't get by.
Yeah, and ultimately what I keep on telling, you know, other clients, and when we talk to the partners at work, like, ultimately, just as long as we've documented, like, no one's going to really come in and tell you did it wrong. I don't think, just as long as we have an agreement and it makes sense, this is why we did it, it's going to work. I don't think anybody's going to come in and say, oh my God, you did this wrong. That's, you know.
Well, what we also don't want to do, Mark, is we don't want to report it one way and
right.
decide, you know what, this is not how we want to do it, and we change
right.
it.
Well, I read your board policies and your regulations, and I didn't see, because when at the ASMO seminar that we go to, they alluded to the fact that a lot of school districts may have to change their policies because if they want to keep it in custodial funds, they may have stuff in their policies that really indicates otherwise, like they have too much administrative control. And I didn't read through it, numerous times, but I did a quick read today. I didn't see anything that stuck out that would have, I think, precluded you from calling it custodial fund. So
Okay.
I think you're okay there.
All right.
Mark, I'd imagine, is anybody putting it through their general fund?
Not that I'm aware of. None of our
Okay.
clients anyway. Maybe somebody in the
Okay.
state is, but none of our clients.
So I know I would definitely recommend not doing that, but,
Yeah.
okay. I was curious if anybody was.
I would,
Okay.
I'm sure somebody in the state is, but why would you want to do that? It doesn't make sense.
Right. It just complicates all the state and
Yeah, you get your
federal
4%.
reporting we have to
Yeah.
do. Right.
All right. So,
Exactly.
so we have a full agenda in the district for the month of June already as it is, right? So I don't want to, Cleo, stack too much on top of you, but, over the next, couple weeks between,
Yeah, we'll work with Cleo
right,
on
Cleo,
this
and
area
and it-
particularly.
then Cleo, reach out to me when you're ready. Happy to go through it with you, and we could put, circulate some literature to the group. So more to come. Is everybody okay with that approach? Anybody have any questions? All right,
Thank you. That'd be perfect.
thank you. Mark, appreciate you raising it. Good discussion. Anything else on 84?
No, the only last put, and just briefly, so there's miscellaneous liabilities in GASB in your fiduciary funds. So sometimes you may have payroll liabilities, but as I talked with Cleo and Jean yesterday, you guys, like most districts, pay the payroll liabilities like the same day as the payroll, so there's never a liability shown, so that's really not an issue. But some of these other small liabilities that typically show up in the fiduciary funds, you may have to run through the general fund now. Like I mentioned, I don't know what you do with your AP deposits, exam fees for the kids, but stuff like that probably is just going to go in the general fund now. I don't know, do you get much of that?
You're
I
on
don't
mute.
recall what you had last year. That's typically what school districts have, miscellaneous student liabilities and.
Cleo, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember, I think last year for our AP exams, it was around 40,000.
Okay.
That went through and again, whatever flows in flows right back out to the College Board. So whatever we collect in from the students ends up going out and covering some of the AP costs associated with that. Yeah, so it pretty much, and I think this year, Jean would probably know better how much is flowing through this year, but I imagine it's going to be right around the same. So you see that going through our general fund?
Yeah, a lot of those smaller liabilities and sources of revenues, I'm probably going to run through the general fund. We'll have to talk to see what you really have.
Yeah.
Some things can stay, but some things aren't. Because the idea is, if you're charging the students for the AP exam, which most districts do,
Right.
that is considered a revenue to the district, even though you're just paying it back out. So then you have an expense when it goes out. But it is considered a revenue of the district
Right.
under GASB 84.
Right.
So,
Right. That one makes sense to me because, I think the district does charge a little bit more to try and cover some of the fees. So, I think we're making 5 cents an exam.
I mean,
or
I
something
think
like
all these
that.
liabilities are immaterial to the big
Right.
picture, but
Right.
we got to comply with the standards. So
Right. It's not a
that's
lot.
that's kind of it on GASB 84, unless there's more questions. But I think we have our homework to do, and
Appreciate
we'll
that.
talk more.
And then, hey, Mark, on item 7, if you're done with item 6,
Yeah.
item 7, I think should actually be done through correspondence, not in this meeting.
We always do. We will definitely be sending you letters.
Okay. So we'll
And
cover that.
yeah, and I appreciate. I think you guys usually respond pretty well. Some districts we don't get great responses, but I think you guys always respond pretty good. So
All right. And if you don't, feel free to reach out to me. I have no
Okay.
problem helping facilitate.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, if there's no other questions, I'm set. But I'm happy to answer other questions if you have.
I will open up to the rest of the group. Does anybody have any more questions for Mark or Cleo on the the external audit?
Okay. Well, I hope you get to enjoy the good weather we're having. It's decided and everybody gets a nice holiday weekend. And then we'll be talking to you soon.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks,
Really
Mark.
appreciate it.
You
All
too.
right. Have a good evening and we'll be talking soon, Cleo. All right. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, good discussion, and always looking forward to it. Another external audit. It's like we just did one a week ago. But anyway, good process and in good hands. So thank you, Cleo. Appreciate all your help on that.
Let's not forget, we're also in the midst of our OSC audit. So it's a shame they can't share.
Unfortunately not. So, all right. So just trying to close out business as we go. All right. So I think we're up to item 4, discuss and review the independent auditor's audit plan. Can I get a motion?
Sorry, so I'll motion to accept the external audit plan.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Connie. Resolved that the audit committee accept the audit plan for the year ending June 30th, 2021, as presented by Nugent and Hausler, PC, the independent auditors of the district. The audit is currently scheduled for the week of August 2nd, 2021. Motion to accept carried by all. All right, next item up is the internal auditor's engagement letter. So I don't know if everybody had a chance to review it. Marianne had submitted it. Looked pretty straightforward. I didn't see anything jumping out of the engagement letter. Cleo looks pretty consistent with last year. Fees, at least from top of mind, looked about the same as well. Is that correct?
Yes, the fees are the same with the not to exceed amount of 12,000.
And as customary with the internal audit, we do a risk assessment first, and then those findings are presented to the audit committee, and then we'll determine which areas to actually perform an internal audit on. So this is just the approval of the engagement letter. Cleo, do you know what the timing of the risk assessment is? I don't think I saw that in the engagement letter.
I feel like that's usually done November, December time.
Okay, I just want to make
Is
sure
when,
not while we're in the midst of year-end audits and stuff like that.
oh, no. It's done. It's done tends to be done end of October, beginning of November. And we usually get the results November, December time. Yeah, and that's on a very specific cycle, that risk assessment audit. And then I think we get to pick and choose when they do the
Yeah, sure.
right, the other, and that, but in the past, it's usually been February, March. But those are during the school year with Mark closing out the year or external.
Cleo, did you have any concerns or questions about the internal audit?
No. No, I mean, the risk assessment is the standard that they do. They'll pick, this committee will pick the audit area as we come closer. I'm sure we'll be picking it in the fall sometime. So no, I don't have any
All right.
concerns.
Does anybody have any questions on the engagement letter? All right. Terrific. With that, if I can get a motion. Sorry, everybody's on mute.
I'll make a motion. It's Mary.
Thank you, Mary. Get a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Connie. All right, this one's a little bit lengthy. Whereas R.S. Abrams and Company LLP was recommended by the committee and appointed by the Board of Education at the March 26, 2019 as the district's internal auditors commencing with the 2019-2020 school year, with an option to extend at the end of each year for a maximum of 4 additional years. Whereas R.S. Abrams and Company LLP has submitted an engagement letter for internal audit services for the 2021-2022 school year, and said engagement letter has been reviewed by the committee. See appended engagement letter. The scope of services shall consist of an update to the initial risk assessment at a fee not to exceed $8,800. Furthermore, based on the results of the risk assessment update, other areas will be identified for testing of internal controls at a rate not to exceed $12,000 for each control system tested. Resolved that the committee recommends that the Board of Education accept the engagement letter from R.S. Abrams and Company LLP to provide services for the 2021-2022 school year. Motion to accept carried by all. All right, great. All right, item 6, pretty lengthy agenda we've had today. Item 6, recommendation for appointment to the audit committee. So we have Mary's appointment is actually coming up for expiration this year. And I want to speak on Mary's behalf, but I believe she is willing to renew her seat in the audit committee. Mary, is that a fair and accurate statement?
Yes, it is. Very fair and accurate. Thanks.
Gotta be careful, otherwise, you know, if you good thing you didn't miss the meeting, otherwise somebody might nominate you.
Oh yeah, for something better, right?
So with that, we are going to need a nomination for Mary. So I'll nominate Mary Hartnett.
So I can second that.
Great. Thank you, Camille. Resolved that Mary Hartnett be recommended to the South Orangetown Central School District Board of Education for appointment to the Audit Committee for a term of 3 years, commencing July 1, 2021. Be it further resolved that the amended Audit Committee charter, I apologize, I'm going to pause. We also attached the annual charter, which is being referenced in this motion as well. It's amended, really. The only change, and Cleo will correct me, just the dates on it are changed. Every year we renew it. So there's been no other changes to the charter. So unless anybody has any questions or changes to the charter, we're going to move that as well. Hearing none, be it further resolved that the amended Audit Committee charter has been reviewed by the Audit Committee, and the committee recommends that the Board of Education approve the charter as amended. Motion to accept carried by all. No objections. Great. And then before we adjourn, we had a topic, I think, I don't know if we discussed it at the last meeting or not. We had talked about considering expanding the council to have some extra seats or membership into the council. So the business office has attached to this kind of a draft of what that communication would look like. But frankly, you know, since this is the last meeting of the school year, I would love to get everybody's feedback. I'm a little reluctant to send out a notice now, have candidates start sending in resumes, but then we wouldn't be able to do interviews until September. So I feel like it might be more appropriate to hold it for August/September, and then this way candidates aren't sitting around for a couple months wondering what's happening. Everybody kind of okay with that strategy?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. So then, Cleo, if you wouldn't mind telling Michelle, this I thought the announcement was fine, but if we can hold it, you know, August might be too early. We might have to do it a couple times with August and September. I think we should send it out.
Okay, absolutely.
All right, that is our agenda. Cleo, is there anything else on your agenda that we haven't covered with the group? I didn't have anything in my notes.
I didn't have anything. I mean, last time, the only thing we talked about, which I think Michelle followed up, letting you know who was on their terms, how you recruited last time. That was it. So
Great.
I think we've covered everything.
All right. Before we break, anybody else have anything else? All right. So can't believe it. This is the last meeting of the school year. I know the school year is not over yet, but it's quickly approaching.
Quickly.
I, as always, appreciate everybody's time and commitment. Everybody I know has a lot going on. This is an important commitment to the district. I personally am grateful for everybody's time and participation. So thank you for another wonderful year. And I am looking forward to meeting in person, hopefully in September.
Yes.
That would be great.
So
Yep.
we will keep everybody in touch, GASB 84 is definitely a hot topic, and, it's got a lot of couple pieces to it for consideration. So watch for more to come on that. And if we need to do a quick huddle on it, we can of course convene a meeting. I'm not sure we're gonna need it, but if the group feels we do, we can always add in a ad hoc meeting.
I just want to reiterate something about GASB 84. It is really along the lines of what Mark was saying. There's no one right answer. ASBO is presenting their suggestions. OSC has their guiding document. Now SCD is chiming in. Mark's going to make his recommendation in legal. So I think if we just take all of that together and move forward, we'll be fine.
Yeah, and Cleo, maybe also reach out to your counterparts, right? Because you don't want to be the only one who does it one way, because then that just raises questions, right? So whatever you think your position is, and then maybe just stress test it with others.
Definitely. Yep. That's what ASBO is really good for. It's a large network. So I'll get some responses from in the county, but also across the state as well. So definitely.
All right. So watch your inboxes. More excitement to come on 84. And with that, if I can get a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Motion. It's Mary
Thank
to
you.
adjourn.
I get a second.
I will second, sorry.
Thank you, Connie. We won't have to deal. I am really hoping we don't have to deal with mute buttons anymore.
But just think of when you're in a meeting, you might miss it, right? When you can't.
Right, right.
Very fair. I'll have to remember that, Camille. Well, thank you, everybody. Again, been a interesting year, but again, appreciate all the great work that has been done by this council and committee. So thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody.
Have a nice summer,
Have a-
everyone. Take care.
Great summer.
Bye-bye.
Have a great summer. Have a good evening.